on the need assessment, and that's Dr. Carol Adair, and I'm not sure if she's joined now, but she will be joining the webinar at some point, and she's joining us, just for the needs assessment part of the agenda. And the other team member that is also online with us, that's part of the hub, is Mary Alice Jolin, who will be helping us prepare the event briefs and has already been doing that in the past as well from these webinars and other events. So we welcome those folks as well. So we really hope that you will feel free to share your thoughts, questions, and comments freely through this webinar. You can do that verbally or by using the chat function in Zoom. And Eric will be attending to the chat input, and we'll try to make sure that that input is brought to our conversation. And as always, we just ask that you please mute yourself when you're not speaking. I think that's it for housekeeping notes. So maybe we'll move to the next slide. So maybe, into the slide with the flow for today. So after we've kind of just taken this time to open and arrive for today's conversation, we're going to launch into the needs assessment portion, and that will be the hub team providing updates on preliminary findings from that process. And then after that, we'll move into the open space for project sharing and for discussion. We're proposing about 25 minutes for each of those sections, but with flexibility, which is indicated by those question marks, for if the conversation kind of takes a little longer or shorter. And then we'll just close out with some just brief reflections from the webinar. Great, okay, so I think over to you, Eric.
For sure, yeah, and just at the outset, and to touch on what Annetta just mentioned about the flow for the rest of this conversation, this meeting, we just wanted to pose a question to the group to see really if there's any burning questions or topics that you'd really like to see covered today during the open discussion or otherwise. Feel free to either chime in verbally or enter in chat. And if there's a long list or if there's lots to approach, we'll adjust the agenda accordingly. So I'll just give a minute and for you to enter in anything that you'd like to be talked about in particular today, or if anybody has anything they'd like to mention up front, feel free to chime in. And if there is nothing specific or no major questions, then we can, I guess, just shift right into the needs assessment discussion.
I know everybody's going to get a little bit warmed up as we go. So for the needs assessment, really in the interest of time, I mean, our goal today is, I describe it a little bit as a teaser. It's really for full transparency on what the hub is doing during these pandemic times in particular. For a lot of our planning and development, that's really planting the seeds for what's to come. So for that transparency and for your awareness as the funded projects, because every kind of direction that we're taking is directly in support of you as funded projects and the MHPIF in more generally. So we can only do that little bit of a teaser today, but we're really looking for your early reactions as well. So we've got a few questions that we'll be posing later as well. So my job today is really just to cover. It's a bit tough to do briefly, but I'm going to do it. Just to cover the why, the how, and the what of the needs assessment. This is really preliminary sort of highlights that we'll get to, but I do want to just pause briefly on the why and the how. So that creates more of that understanding of where some of these sort of early findings are coming from. So with respect to the why, two main purposes to really keep in mind. we've kept these front of mind, and just for your awareness, the two key things that we're trying to inform. One is the new knowledge development opportunities. This is a really core part of the KDE Hub's mandate. And these are for, you know, what are some of the things that can really be learned from some or all of the funded projects. And, you know, they've got to be meaningful. I'll get to what that means, and also realistic with where projects are at and what's unrolling. Or unfolding. So new knowledge development opportunities, that's a really key part of what we're trying to figure out with the help of this needs assessment activity. The second main purpose has to do with hub supports. We are a supportive entity within the MHPIF, and the kinds of things that we need to consider, not at one moment in time, but over time, is about the content, the types, the timing, the tailoring of all different types of support for projects. So those are the two core purposes that I think are really important for all of us to keep in mind. So with the core purposes, there are also many sort of inputs that help us arrive at these sort of directions for new knowledge development and for hub supports. And by no means will I go into these things in detail, but I think it's really important for awareness. And one of the things I'd like to mention as well, Annetta mentioned there will be of course, an event brief from this webinar. Something else that we're going to include as an event brief is actually our full protocol for the needs assessment. And that'll really be for those who are really interested in seeing a lot of the detail of what you're hearing in sort of a thumbnail sketch, but you'll be able to see the detail of all the different protocol behind it, and recognizing that, like you, all of our protocols that have to do with any data collection, all of this went through an ethics review process as well. So moving along with the why. So the different types of inputs that we're considering when we think about our two core purposes. So as it relates to new knowledge development, we always start with use in mind. So who are the different audiences, and what is it that they're going to use the new knowledge for? That relates to each individual project, you as a collective, and also at different system levels. So who are potential funders, and who needs to know, who's making policy around mental health promotion in Canada as well. So always considering who are the audiences and what are the purposes that they're using information for. If there are new knowledge development opportunities, those have to build on the existing knowledge base. So that awareness of the current knowledge base, and then what's going to be realistic and meaningful coming from the funded MHPIF projects is, what is it that you're doing? Your innovation and intervention plans, and also evaluation plans that are going to help feed into some of this new knowledge development. Whoopsie! And then also, and this is a really big one, is this project context for implementation. This is especially that sort of post-COVID, peri and post-COVID time. So that's something that you'll see in another slide, which is about how we're trying to address that. So those are the main inputs for informing some of the new knowledge development. For the hub supports, we've got another set of inputs. One is, we start with what we know right now about the most desirable, or what's promising for child and youth mental health promotion. All of you would have seen, but I wouldn't expect you to necessarily remember it all, but all of those different features that are part of the hub vision. What were they? Evidence-informed, sensitivity to context, sensitivity to culture, equitable, sustainable. Though that's our starting point for what we're trying to support within the MHPIF. Then there's also what we've heard from all of you about your own sort of felt or expressed needs for what's going to be most useful. Then there's also, an analysis that we're doing right now that's possible needs and there's lots of overlap here with what you've expressed to us, but possible needs in relation to what I've just described in terms of the hub vision, about those different characteristics of most promising child and youth mental health promotion. And in addition, similar to what you saw over our new knowledge development, project context and capacity. Like, we're not ignoring that at all, and lots we need to learn still about what that means today and tomorrow because of what's happening, what's unfolding with the pandemic. So that's the why and just the real grounding on our approach to the needs assessment. The next slide talks about the how, and this flow chart basically just gives again that sort of overview of major steps along the way. And the dark box is the one in the lower left. That is where we are today. Just this description of, sort of sharing what we've been doing and discussing some of the findings. But the key steps along the way, that again, bit of a recap, but also just so you know where this is going. Since today is just, as you can see, sort of midway, but we've done all of the data collection. There's the hub team project specific analysis that we're doing. Today is actually when we finish the 20 calls that we've done on this, different team members coming together, but that analysis that's really looking at possible needs in relation to the hub vision characteristics. So then there's today. Following today, I think all of you have been contacted about upcoming calls this month in May with the Public Health Agency for them to get a better understanding of where things are at because of COVID. And they will be sharing, the hub members won't be on those calls, but the FACT team, they will be sharing just basic updates from each of you with us. So that information will come in, and that's really, really important for us to know too, to best serve in our role. So after we learn about that, we'll integrate all the information. We'll, come back with a more updated set of directions that relate to, you got it, the two things, the new knowledge development and also the hub supports, and then continue to roll those things out, and that we'll always consider the focus, the timing, the sequence, the pace, feedback along the way, evolving context. That's a lot that I've shared right now, but I think a really important point is that this is all a process, not an event. What we're describing today about this needs assessment, it is an initial process and a really important one at the front end to steer essentially the KDE Hub ship. It really is that steering function, recognizing there will be course corrections along the way. We'll continue to adapt and change just as you are with things that are unfolding or stalled at some points right now because of COVID. So process, not an event, but this is what you can expect from us as it relates to the needs assessment. So spoiler alert, the next slide is going to get into some of the findings on the new knowledge development piece. And the spoiler alert is that you're going to say, oh my gosh, look at the dense content. It is dense. And the reason for that is because Annetta and Eric are going to sort of be posing some questions and get some discussion going on this. And what we wanted to make sure is that you can actually see the content on the screen, so that it'll just be a reminder as those questions are posed. So these are some of the preliminary findings for the new knowledge development. And I think this is really important. Just the framing that I want to offer for this is that the reality is that we're all working in this field of mental health promotion. It's a pretty fledgling field. And few people in the grand scheme across the country would even identify with it. And so, yourselves, the MHPIF in general, really trying to strengthen the upstream end of the mental health continuum of care. Super strong on concepts, social determinants of health, identity formation, strengths-based programming, super strong on concepts, weaker on action, and really understanding the effects of those. And so, what we're all in the, kind of the process of doing is helping to make this real, practical, real, compelling, learn as we go, as it's being done across the country. So that real pioneering that's happening within the MHPIF. And so what you see on the slide in front of you right now is just some of the pop-out learning or pop-out areas for some of the learning. And everything I've said as background really helps to frame the overall question about how do we actually do this well within the Canadian context and with all of the many diverse and important populations that each and every one of you is working with. So how do we best do that? And some of the things that have really been pop-out areas that have come, that we've seen within your initial proposals, within what's being done, I've tried to bold some of these key things. So authentic engagement, and that's with the children and youth, with parents, with caregivers, with partners. So that whole, how do you do that well? The authentic engagement, that relates to this whole idea of co-design. What's the value of it? How's it best done with all these different groups? A lot of shared sort of practices that relate to the trauma-informed and strengths-based approaches. But what do those innovations actually look like? How do they potentially combine trauma-informed and strength-based approaches? The whole theme of adaptation. How do you adapt interventions for different populations? And that's a whole wide range of cultures, histories, gender identities, disabilities, lots of diversity. I mean, it's actually quite profound and amazing across the projects within the MHPIF, all these different groups, and which of course has huge potential for learning. Also, as it relates to adaptation, this whole dealing with the dynamic tension of, and I put in quotes here, the fidelity and flexibility. So those sort of core ingredients, how do we maintain those and also ensure sufficient flexibility? Another pop-out area, this whole idea of the sensitivity to context, the fit between interventions and context. Again, strong on the concept of that, but do we really know in deep ways how that's best done across the country and specifically for mental health promotion? Lots to learn in that area. And another one, building the base from the outset for sustainability and scalability. How is that best done? And how do you do that with different, again, in the different communities, with different characteristics, different populations? So those are just some of the pop-out, and I'll pass things over to Eric and Annetta to get the conversation going.
Sure. Thanks, Barb. So just a first question about these kind of pop-out areas for new knowledge development. Are any of them surprising, or do you wonder where they came from? Something you see on that list that you didn't expect? Est-ce que ces opportunités de nouvelles connaissances vous sont étonnantes? And again, feel free to either unmute yourself and chat, or submit it into the Zoom chat if you have any comments on this first question. So from the Madsky Abbotsford Impact Society, we have just a comment saying, oh, they all look very relevant. Thank you for that. Another comment, seems like you only listen to us in making this, which is very heartening. Appreciate that comment for sure. Comment from Julie. C'est directement en phase avec nos besoins. And to translate into English, it's directly lined up with our needs. And that's great to hear. I'll maybe pose another question. Just about these opportunities for new knowledge development. Are there any that excite you the most? Or which ones are the most exciting for you or for your project? Et en français, lesquelles des opportunités ici vous enthousiasment le plus et pourquoi? Are there any of these in this list of bolded items that are particularly? Oh, did the screen come down? Oh, I think so. Sorry. Sorry about that. Just a second. There we go. So yes, any of these particularly exciting for you for your project? And another question, kind of building on the first one, is there anything missing? So a couple of responses coming in about the which ones are the most exciting. We have the dynamic tension of fidelity and flexibility. Great. Krista Romaldi is really interested in questions 4 and 5, but think that they all apply to our work and are pretty exciting. And all of them are pretty exciting. Awesome. And again, from Matsky Abbotsford Impact Society, I've always been concerned with the use of the word authentic because it can feel so vague and aspirational. So I'm interested in seeing what kind of empirical strength we can add to this. Wonderful point. It's important to be very purposeful with the language we use. From Tavia, really interested in learning more about building a strong base for sustainability and scalability, especially as the pilot phase of our project is very high touch with both participants and co-design partners, looking to learn more about how to potentially implement this on a larger scale without a significant loss of impact. Lisa, from Lisa McGinnis, very interested in trauma approaches for youth and scalability. Great. And Céline, also wondering about the authentic engagement. Great stuff. Thanks, guys. And I'll just reiterate that third question here again. Is there anything missing from this list? Qu'est-ce qui manque?
Eric, I think you guys have done a really great job with the list. It obviously, someone mentioned it earlier. I think it really reflects that you guys were really diligent and paying a lot of attention with the conversations for us. I know when I'm looking through these questions, it sort of reflects almost point by point the sort of conversation that we had. So I'm assuming that the conversations were similar with everyone else because, yeah, I think this list is really reflective of sort of our concerns and some of the areas that we wanted to learn more about. So, yeah, I think it's a great looking list.
Awesome, thanks for sharing, Joey. Another comment from Jenny: fidelity and flexibility for us too, especially in light of potential program delivery changes we may need to make while ensuring that the content and fidelity are maintained. Nothing appears to be missing for Julie, which is great. And final comment here from Amanda: the scalability structure will be very helpful. Our organization has been growing rapidly, and it will be helpful to have the KDE Hub to bounce ideas off of. Lovely. Stony shared also the Students Commission and Center of Excellence for Youth Engagement does use a validated tool regarding qualities of youth engagement. Used in many places and programs. That's great. Awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Any final comments? Oh, there's a couple more. I think we need to have something. What are evidence-based manners to systems change? Awesome. and Stony just adding in about that validated tool for comparisons to an existing aggregate, if people are interested. Awesome. Again, feel free to continue to submit answers or submit questions or comments in the chat box, but I think at this point we'll pass it back over to Barb to talk about the second sort of stream or component of these preliminary findings.
Okay, thanks so much. This is fantastic, actually. The comments that have come through. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned in the about the new knowledge development opportunities. One of the things that we'll need to build into that as we move, as a hub, move into more of the sort of system engagement beyond the projects as well, is what those information needs are elsewhere. That's also informing the new knowledge development opportunities. So super important to bring all this together. And again, it'll evolve over time. So really helpful conversation on that. Thank you. Thank you very much. And certainly for the validation, there's a lot that's not there right now. I mean, this is just, you know, early days. We're not even yet finished all of the conversations, but I think enough of a flavor of the essence of what's coming out. So the second area, I want to do a little quiz here. What's a second area? Yes, it's hub supports. That's one of the, you know, the second purpose for the needs assessment. And what you're seeing in front of you is the what of the hub supports, not the how. So I'll just remind people, remember our hub orientation calls and so on, the how or the means of these supports. I mean, we have the three main functions: the curating knowledge, the making connections, and the coaching and mentoring. Those are the how, the means. That's not what we're focusing on right here. What we're just showing today is more so what support is really needed to focus on. And how we've organized these for today is, it's, again, the real pop-outs seem to be in three main areas. And again, one of the real takeaway messages from these three areas is how much is emphasized at the front end and related to more project and intervention design, and also evaluation supports that are fit for purpose for those early stages. So the first area of the project design and development, and actually, you know, design and development don't just happen, as I think we all know, at one moment in time. That continues as projects are implemented, unfold. There are always aspects of ongoing adaptation and development. So some of the support needs that came out here relate to co-design practices. Again, this authentic engagement, the ways to support shared understanding of project goals, activities, outcomes. So think there like the theories of change, and nice, you know, sort of visuals, easy to grasp ways of communicating what you do. There's a lot of complexity in these projects, and that's a strength. And yet being able to communicate that in a meaningful and straightforward way is something that came up as well. That would be great, even to help engage other partners, etc. Also related to aspects of design and development, absolutely applying Indigenous worldviews in practice, applying an equity lens. So things that relate to things like recruitment of children and youth and parents and caregivers and others, but who's in, who's out, and supports related to that, and then also considering scale up early on. The second sort of main bucket, and you know, that is the evaluation supports. Again, main point here is about this matching the evaluation supports to the stage of project development. And what's really come through loud and clear is and it's partly a function, I think, of some of the requirements of the application process, you know, that tend to focus more on some of the outcome evaluations. Those are important. And there are lots of issues too related to measurement and ensuring that, you know, an appropriate outcome evaluation can be put in place. And yet, what tends to get neglected are more of the earlier stage evaluation supports for the earlier stages of development for projects. So, you know, more of an emphasis on some of the developmental and implementation evaluations. Again, more at that front end and as projects are implemented. Also, supports around applying different ways of knowing. And in many ways, ensuring that a lot of the practice principles that are aligned with Indigenous worldviews, in particular, that those carry through into evaluation strategies as well. So more narrative-based, arts-based, storytelling, etc. What I failed to mention earlier on too was the, you know, the need for guidance on what I put here, the why, what, when, where, and how of ethics approval, because that's super important. There are only certain conditions under which that's required and when in a process. So some of the guidance around that sort of popped out as well that, that might be useful. And then thirdly, the third sort of bucket that's emerged for hub supports is more related to sort of our mandate in creating the conditions for, you know, the strongest implementation possible for the projects, but also the future, like the systemic supports within provinces, territories, the country for supporting the sustainability, the scalability of promising interventions, and ensuring there's enough of a sort of support for child and youth mental health promotion more generally, awareness and commitment and investment in that, that's really setting the stage for longer term impact. The other thing is about the, and this is where there's a link between the new knowledge development that can be a focus for all of us, and making sure that any data collection is aligned with what we collectively decide are the most promising new development opportunities. So that's a support where the hub needs to be working hand in glove with the public health agency as well to ensure that we don't have these disconnects within the MHPIF. So again, that's I think where I'll stop and pass things over to Eric and Annetta.
For sure, and similar questions this time around. Again, just around, do any of these supports surprise you? Is anything surprising in this list? Est-ce que vous voyez quelque chose d'étonnant sur cette liste? Okay. How about which of these hub supports do you think will be the most useful for your project from this list? Just a comment from Matsky Abbotsford, especially looking forward to the systems support. So I'll post that question right here. So which of these hub supports do you think would be most useful for your project? Lequel de ces soutiens du Carrefour serait le plus utile pour votre projet? Céline added in, considering scale up early on.
Awesome.
Anything else most useful for it? System supports for us at Foxy. It's great. So. Julie shared system supports, data collection, wonderful opportunity to have your support. It's great to hear. And just the third question, just to reiterate, is there anything missing from this list? Anything that you think really ought to be here or ought to be represented in some way? Celine adds on that system supports would be very helpful too. Awesome. Anything missing from this list?
As the hub listening in too, hopefully not. This can be a little overwhelming.
That's great. Julie shared that from her perspective, nothing's missing. Awesome. Okay. Well, again, feel free to continue to add to that stream of comments in Zoom chat or verbally. Krista, I'll just read this one. I'm interested in applying different ways of knowing in our evaluation. I'm also interested in how we ensure that diverse ways of knowing and evaluating are valued by the institutions with which we share our evaluations and research. That's great. Okay, awesome. Thanks for your contributions and participation in those questions. So I think we can move on from this part of the kind of agenda today and open things up a little bit. Just if there's anything top of mind for anybody, or if you want to carry on discussion from what's been mentioned in the chat, I'll just stop the recording here so that we have an endpoint for the recording.